hopefully that's recording now. Yeah. Okay, so I hope you're all happy to be recorded. Right. So welcome to this FIT5 rule change session. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Gareth Hines. I'm an England touch referee. I've been reffing since, well, I think about 2005, something like that. I'm based in London. I ref in the Clapham League and the Chiswick League for Into Touch. And obviously I ref at NTS's, CTS, DTS, all that kind of thing, and at international level as well. So a bunch of us in England Touch and the ERC with the European Touch Federation have been looking at the new rules that have been adopted for a 2-year trial period, so-called 5th edition FIT rules. And we've put together some documentation summarizing what are the main changes moving from FIT4 to FIT5. And in conjunction with that, we've been holding a number of online sessions because of COVID, obviously, to just disseminate those changes and have some discussion with players, referees and coaches and people with a general interest in touch, just so everyone's on the same page, so that when we get back to playing in a more widespread way with these new rules, everybody knows the situation, knows how it's going to be played, knows how it's going to be refereed, and we just hit the ground running and get some consistency. So that's the aim of this evening. I've penciled in 2 hours, but I know it was originally just supposed to be 1 hour. Anyone who needs to leave after 1 hour, absolutely fine. Just drop out. That's no problem. It is being recorded, so you can catch up later. You can watch it at your leisure. And the recording will be made available to other people too. So just be careful, no swearing, please. Right, just a word on the presentation. It's a very large file, as I'm sure those of you who downloaded it noticed. It does sometimes cause a few issues when we're playing the videos over live streaming. So let me know if it's jerky in any way or we can't see it. I may just ask you to view the videos yourself for those of you that have already downloaded the presentation. But really, I think this is more of a discussion. We're probably not going to watch all of the videos. They're there for you to watch in your own time. But for some of them, for some of the more important ones, it's probably good to watch as we discuss. So before we start, does anyone have any questions? Okay. I'm now going to share my screen. Jason, you've got your hand up.
Sorry, yeah, just a quick question, Gareth. With this trial being for 2 years, does that mean that for the next lot of refereeing courses, these are the only rules that's going to get taught on the course?
Yeah, all of the courses are being updated. The level 1 course has already been updated. All of the courses will be updated to reflect the new rules. I mean, these are now effectively the rules of touch as we play, as we ref, as we coach, and as we teach in the courses.
Okay, happy days. Thanks, Gareth.
Okay. All right, I'm at the end of the presentation, which is great. I seem to like the F5 button in Teams, so I'm going to have to bring it to the start. And right, can everyone see that full screen?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I've kind of covered this in the brief intro I gave. We've started a 2-year trial period across the world, so everyone is doing this. The 5th edition rules are based on the Touch Football Australia 8th edition rules. So we owe a lot of gratitude to Australia for making these rules available to the international community. And of course, Touch Football Australia have a lot of resources. They've put a lot of work into developing these new rules. And the first thing I want to emphasize is really that these rules don't really represent a huge change to the game. They're really catching the rules up with how the game was already being played. So if you're already playing the game, particularly at elite level, really all you'll find from these new rules is that they just actually make the rules catch up with what you were already doing. So it's not really a big change, it's more of an alignment. And it should help to make the game make more sense, have more consistent rules, and basically make it a better game for everyone. So EFT and England Touch are participating in the trial, as I said, and these rules will be used at the 2021 Euros next season. As I said, I would like to see people marking the pitches properly from now on. I mean, my local league are still using 5 meters, which I've had words with them about. But we do need to see people using these rules. It's a universal case, so there should be no exceptions. And this extends from elite level all the way down to grassroots level. So why are we doing this? Well, as I mentioned, we're trying to just align the rules with how the game was already being played. We've updated the terminology to realign with the roots of the sport in rugby. And the aim is just to make the game better. And by better, we mean quicker, more consistent, more common sense. And the rules have already been used in Australia at the 2020 NTLs. And the feedback from there was they didn't really change how the game was played. And most people were quite surprised, really, with how smoothly the transition went and how easy it was to do. So hopefully it will be the same for us in England and in Europe. For those of you that haven't seen the 2 documents that England Touch have published, they are available to download on the website. And really this presentation is just summarizing everything that's in the detailed document. So there's a brief summary document that just gives the most important changes. That's the one on the left. And on the right, there's the in-depth review. So please feel free to go to the England Touch website and download those. In terms of terminology, for those of you that were tired of American football terms, we now use try instead of touchdown, in-goal area instead of touchdown area, try line instead of score line, and sin bin instead of period of time. So really just to be more consistent with the rugby codes. So now on to some of the most important changes. In this presentation, we go through all the changes pretty much in the same order as they are in the England Touch documents, and those were deliberately ranked in order of their impact on the game. So the changes at the end are more detail and fiddly little changes, and to be honest, a lot of them don't really come into things at social level, the grassroots level. Most of those type of changes only apply at the very highest levels of the game. So I'll understand if people, once we get through the most important changes, want to drop off if you've got better things to do on your Friday nights. So that's totally up to you. And as I say, this is being recorded, so you can always watch it again later. Right, let's start with the first one then. Onside distance 7 meters. This is probably the most obvious change. So instead of at least 5 meters for the onside distance, it's now defined as a fixed distance of 7 meters. And that, we hope, will just let everyone know where they stand. There was always a little bit of uncertainty when you go onto the pitch. Where's the referee going to set his onside line? And in Europe, we've certainly seen onside distances of up to 13, 14 meters, depending on the teams and the referee. So hopefully this will give a lot more consistency so players know what to expect when they step on the field. We already talked about the 5 meter line at each end of the field being replaced by a 7 meter line. And that's a really key development in the game, that the important stuff happens around the scoreline, and it's really going to tighten up what the referee and the players do around the scoreline, which will really help. But really, it's not changing much. The onside distance was always supposed to be around 7 meters. Now it's just, as I say, aligning with what was already done. And particularly around the try line, it's tightening up how that really critical area of pulling players back to the line depending on where the ball is dumped. So I'm going to try this video now. So I'm just going to hope that it works. Let me know if you have any problems with the streaming. So This is just an example of Dave Baggio, one of Australia's and the world's leading referees, setting his 7 meters from a tap off. Back into presentation. This happens. Okay, it should work this time. The setting is 7 meters. It's not a 5, it's not a 12, it's 7 each time. How did that video play to you guys? Did anyone have any problems?
It's pretty jumpy.
Yeah, jerky.
Okay.
Yeah, I was struggling with that.
Right, let me try it again. So I'm just going to stop it. So can you all see it paused there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably easier if I pause it rather than have it jumping around. So, you know, that's probably around an 8 meter. So what you will see in the middle of the field, it could be 7, it could be 8. I mean, no one's getting out, you know, a measuring tape. But it's 7 to 8 meters. Again, there, that one's probably more like 7. But at least you won't get the huge variations that we were seeing before with the old rules of at least 5 meters. And again, that's probably around 7 meters. So particularly in fast games, you might see in midfield, the referee still set a little bit bigger than a 7. It sometimes might open out to an 8, but it certainly shouldn't go beyond that. And we'll be, as a referee community, striving to get that consistency. But in midfield, it doesn't really matter whether it's 7 or 8. It's around the try line where we really want that, you know, that almost centimeter consistency. So I'm going to move on to the next video. So this is at the try line. I'm going to pause this again because I get it's probably going to be jerky. So if you can see, the ball's being dumped less than a meter outside the 7 meter line, and the referee is setting his 7 meters just off the try line. So hopefully this 7 meter line will have the result of giving defenders that consistency, where if the ball is dumped on the 7 meter line or beyond it, the players know they're going to be called to the line. But in situations like this one, where the ball is dumped outside this, they know they're not going to be called to the line. They're going to be called to the same distance off the line that the ball is dumped from the 7. And that's just going to give a lot more consistency around the try line. Does anyone have any questions about the 7 meter?
Gareth, not a question about 7 meters, but has someone come off mute? Because you can hear like someone's TV in the background.
I can't see anything. So yeah, can everyone please make sure they're muted?
Yeah.
I'm on full screen presentation here.
Gareth, it's mine. I'm just about to raise my hand for a question. Sorry, apologies.
Okay, no problem.
Just with the setting the 7 meters before the line. If we don't, you know, once players are hitting the line, or just before the line, or if the player's dumped on 7, are we going to start seeing players getting penalised? You know, on infringements on the 7 meters, or I know this is going on a little bit, but are we going to see players getting infringed at the 7 meter line, as well as inside the the in-goal area.
Well, what do you mean by infringed?
I think penalising players for the 3 metre for the three infringement rule.
Okay.
I know it's probably jumping along.
That's a separate issue. Yeah, if you concede 3 successive penalties in the same possession during the Mexican standoff, then yes, the third player is going to be given an exclusion. But I don't think that's directly related to the issue of the 7 meters. As long as, if you're in a standoff situation, as long as the defense move forward until the touch is imminent, they're not going to be penalized. They will be penalized if they don't make it back onside. But hopefully they're now going to know themselves without having to be told roughly where the line's going to be, as opposed to under FIT4 rules, when they made the touch, they really, depending on the referee and the situation, they could be called back 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 meters. So hopefully having the line there physically on the field will really help. And it will force referees to sharpen up as well, because it will still be ultimately their call where the onside line is at the end of the day. But players will be quick to complain if they see that it isn't 7 meters.
Okay, fair. No, that's fair enough.
Any other questions before we move on?
Hi, Gareth. Just a question about how you'd communicate this as a ref. In the video, it looks like the ref's setting it by standing in line with the mark. But normally when I'm reffing the score line, I'm just saying make the line, and I'm still staying well back, kind of out of the dive zone. Would you expect referees to kind of set the mark with themselves, or kind of communicating with 1 meter in front of the line, or things like that? Just any advice?
Yeah. So first of all, if it's a strike dump, the referee shouldn't be standing on the onside line. He should be getting ready to run to either wing to make the good call. So yeah, you're absolutely right. This will be done verbally. Every referee will have their own different style, much as they do now. So I'm probably going to go with just off, 1 off, or 2 off as to what I shout at the players as the ball is dumped, just so they verbally know where it is. And by that I mean meters. So I'm basically going in half-meter increments, because I don't think it's necessary to be more precise than that. So if I say just off, it's probably where that referee is standing now. 1 off, I mean 1 meter off the line, and 2 off. And I will need to talk to the players so that they understand what I mean by that. But every referee will have their own approach. That's what I'm going to start with anyway. Okay, if there are no other questions, we'll keep going. So I probably won't bother showing this because the video is so jerky. You can watch this video at your leisure. This just shows that when the ball goes out of play over the sideline, instead of starting 5 meters infield, you now start 7 meters infield. I mean, that's not rocket science. That's just to be consistent with this, so that this 7 meters is really ingrained into every part of the game. But please feel free to watch that video yourselves. So that's everything to do with the 7. Were there any questions about that 7 meter infield? Right. Okay. So now this is the one that probably causes the most debate, and probably will cause the most debate on the field and in the pub afterwards. There has been now a change again. It's a change in the rules, but it's probably not that big a change compared to how the game was actually refereed, particularly at the elite level. So now this is about retreating following a touch to make an onside position. It used to be under the FIT4 rules that if you change direction during your retreat, you are liable to a penalty. Now that on its own will not be enough to infringe. Now you're allowed to change direction as many times as you like, as long as you don't obstruct, and by which we mean interfere with or impede, the attacking team. So as long as your change of direction doesn't actually physically block a path of an attacking player, you can do it as many times as you like. So there are two things required now for a penalty: a change of direction and an obstruction. And if those two things happen, then the referee will probably in the first instance play advantage, but they can return for the penalty if no advantage is forthcoming. So that's a little bit different from before, but actually if you look at how the game was refereed under FIT4 at elite level, we did always allow some change of direction during retreat, particularly away from the ball, where players might run a J line to get back onside in the most advantageous position for themselves, but they weren't necessarily impeding anyone while doing so. The change of direction in front of the ball carrier was always a penalty, and it still will be, because it will, by definition, if you change direction in front of the ball carrier, you are impeding them. So again, not a huge change from FIT4 to FIT5, but just making sure that the rules are clear, which wasn't really the case before. We were allowing things that were, strictly speaking, not allowed in the rules. Now this has opened things up to be able to do this in a consistent way. So, I mean, a good way of thinking about this is that if you're in front of the ball carrier and they're running towards you, you really have to just maintain your straight line. Unless you're sure that your change of direction is going to be to the side of where they're running. If it isn't, you're going to put yourself liable to a penalty. But for players away from the ball, who might be marking other players, they can change direction, for example, to affect a quicker shot, for example. But as long as they don't get in anyone's way, that's fine. So I don't think it will really change that much the offside penalties that we blow, because the ones near the ball carrier will still be the main ones that the referee is looking for. And then the third bullet point on this slide, this is really important. This won't change from before. So a defender is still entitled to occupy space during their retreat. You can't just run at them and claim obstruction. If they haven't changed direction and they're just retreating in a straight line and making every effort to get onside, then they're not liable to penalty. It's only the combination of changing direction and then obstructing that now leads to an offside penalty.
Gareth, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So say, is this focusing on the ball carrier, or does it cover all 6 defenders?
It covers all 6 defenders, but clearly the ball carrier is going to be the one that the attention is focused on and the one that impacts play the most. So it does cover all defenders, but you're more likely to be pinged if you interfere with the ball carrier. It's going to be a lot more difficult for usually the sideline referees, to be honest, to pick up. But you know, if they do see an obstruction of a player off the ball, then you might well find that a sideline referee will pick it up, and you will be liable to penalty.
And sorry, I've got another question on this. As you said, this was going to be where possibly the most questions were. Say I'm defending, I'm retreating, and I changed my direction to still not obstruct, but run alongside the attacker. But then the attacker then changes their line into where my new line. How does that officiated?
Yeah, so this is the most common question from players, and it's a tricky one. Again, the consensus that we've come to as a referee community, and that's obviously still open to discussion with players and coaches, is that the active changing direction by a defender, even though it might not initially impede the attacker, has left yourself open to a penalty if something changes subsequently. Now, at the same time, on the other side of the coin, we don't want to see players just milking penalties just by changing direction in the exact manner you've suggested. So I think we'll need to find a balance in this area. And one of the things that we're keen to say is that, particularly at the elite level, we think the direction of travel for the coaches and players at the moment is that we want to be better than that. We want to be winning games of touch properly through skill and not by milking cheap penalties. So it's a little bit down to the players, coaches, and referees to work together on this one. But I absolutely agree. This is the one grey area where it's probably going to be an ongoing dialogue. But for the moment, I think our view as referees is that the initial change of direction by the defender does put you in that vulnerable position where if an attacker does want to cut back into you, you're risking the penalty. Again, that would be no different to under FIT4 rules.
Thank you.
There must be more questions than that. Normally this gets loads of questions.
I mean, I could go on for ages, Gareth, but
There's
Don't feel you
raised
have to,
hands,
right?
Gareth.
Yeah, I almost think this is this potentially harder to ref than the deviation rule because of that interpretation of who's obstructing and what is obstruction, especially if they're shadowing the attacking player.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
to me, I don't think much has changed. So I think the only thing this rule change really frees players up to do is to deviate away from the ball carrier. I think around the ball carrier, most deviations are going to affect what the ball carrier is trying to do. So unless you're really clear and you stay out to the side, and there's going to be a line that you can't cross. So again, it's going to come down to clever defending, how far you can push the boundaries. But as a general rule, I think changing direction around the ball carrier is still going to be liable to penalty, just like it was before. And really all this rule opens up is to allow the other defenders who aren't around the ball carrier to get back into position in a more effective way by changing direction.
And again, I guess talk to the players to ensure that you're not giving a penalty.
Yeah. And from a referee's perspective, it's still an offside penalty, but the feedback from Australia was it's good to use the word obstruction, even though you're signaling offside, just to make it really clear that it wasn't just for being offside, it was for obstructing.
yeah, I think generally I quite like the rule changes, apart from this one, which to agree with whoever spoke before me, I feel this introduces subjectivity, whereas before it wasn't there.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions how we educate and inform the players? Because I've already had players saying to me, "Oh, there's no such thing as the deviation rule already."
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, I think one thing you could maybe do is send them the link to this recording when we get it out online. I mean, that will help. But I think it's something that we need to do more, is have more meetings between referees and players. It's something that we did quite well many years ago in England, and I think we need to pick it up again just to make sure that the information is percolating out there and that we develop that good relationship between the referees and the players, because that's vital to getting a good game.
Yeah, I think the main thing is making sure there's a good, clear understanding of what this rule change means and what it isn't.
Yeah, I would try to think of it in your head as not much different from FIT4, in that it will allow you to shut more quickly, but you still can't mess around in front of the ball carrier. So to me, I'm thinking about it in that relatively clear and simple way.
Yeah, I know that it's more like a J line for me, but it's more of the players in front of me and having to tell them, no, deviation has gone, but it doesn't mean that you can completely obstruct people and mirror them and not retreat. Yeah,
I think if you're the defender retreating ahead of the ball carrier, you have to think, right, I am a special case. I am going to have the most attention on me. And anything I do, I have to be really sure it's not going to be interpreted as obstruction. And that, it's very difficult for anything you do in that situation not to be interpreted as obstruction. So I think that's the message I would get out there, that for the player in front of the ball carrier, not much has changed. It's really only for the other players that they have a little bit more latitude.
Sorry, Gareth, can I ask one more question? So in the scenario I gave where you spoke about we don't want players trying to milk a penalty, in that scenario, would the referee be obliged to blow the penalty because there has been a change of direction and an obstruction? Or does a referee have a discretion to say, I think you're just milking that, I'm not going to give you it?
Yep, the referee does have discretion, and I think what I'd like to shout in that situation, if I think that the player has just cut back, and if he's allowed to continue on his cutback route, and I don't think he's actually going to be any better off, or perhaps even worse off than if he'd continued on his original line, I might just give a really early shout of play on, and then have the conversation later. That might be the best way to cut that out. But again, we're not going to know until we actually get out on the field and start trying to implement this. Having said that, I did a game about a month ago, which was, effectively a Taipan Sharks level game, and there wasn't a single problem because those guys were just trying to play the game properly. So I didn't feel it was any different to a game under the FIT4 rules. It was just, people just got on with it, and there wasn't one example of that type of play. Maybe at intermediate levels you might start to see that, but I think we can deal with it, and we can have the conversations that we need to have about it. But that would be my instinct for the moment, would be a really early shout of play on, and let's see if cutting back like that helps you.
Thank you.
Gareth, a quick one on this again. What happens if you shout play on, but I'm the attacking player with the ball, and I come back to you and say, sorry, that I don't want a penalty?
Yeah, well, again,
you've called the play on, and maybe I want the penalty. We've got a set play set up or something like that, but you said play on, and I don't want to play on.
Yeah,
because I would say I think I deserve a penalty.
Yeah, in that situation, I'm probably going to have to give a penalty, but then I think that's where we have the conversation after the game, and again, yeah, I haven't seen that yet. And I don't like to see players stop and just ask for the penalty. But yeah, if that happened, I probably would have to give the penalty, and I probably wouldn't be too happy about it. But yeah, that's if we see that happening, then we'll have to come up with a unified stance on it.
Yeah, it's just a scenario I thought that could probably come up with,
Yeah, and you may well be right. It may happen.
Yeah.
Let's see. I haven't come across it yet, but again, I've only done a handful of games since the new rules came in.
Gareth, can I ask one quickly that's come off a game I've already refed? So suppose you got a strike play setting up near the line. The defenders got out of the ruck quickly, so isn't immediately with the ball carrier, but say is retreating quite straight. The strike player kicks out and the defender goes with him out and kind of shuts off that space. Under FIT4, that would obviously be a penalty for deviation because he's changed his line. And here, if he's far enough out, he's not physically obstructing the runner, but is shutting off the space that they're kind of trying to create with the move that they've run. And I've already had defenders saying, well, it's obstruction now, and I've not obstructed him. I've not gone near him. Would that be something that you'd still be calling for a penalty?
So I think if after the change of direction, the line of run of the defender took him, intersected with the attacker's line of attack before the onside position, then that's obstruction. If you can keep that line to the side so that you cross the onside line before you cross the line of attack of the player, then I think you've done enough to stay onside. But if you're going to intercept the attacker's line before you're onside, then I think that's the distinction, and that's obstruction. Yeah, and to be very clear, obstruction does not require you to make physical contact with the player in any way. It's just shutting down their line by your physical presence.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at, because in this example, the attacker then was pulling out of his line because he felt that the space had already been shut off and was looking for the penalty. So I guess that was, as I say, does it have to be physical obstruction?
No, it doesn't. So in that example, for me, that would be a penalty.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well. Great, thanks.
Anything else? I do have a few videos here. I don't think we necessarily.
So I thought that was a really interesting question and really interesting response. So if I was, again, it's hard to define how you influence the attacker. So I could be 3 meters back from a touch when the scooper picks up. They goes forward 3 meters. I go back 4. I'm on side. I mean, I can start, whilst I'm getting on side, I can still vary as much as I want because I'm kind of 3 meters away from them and not influencing that much.
Absolutely, and I think that's the key. If you're that far away and you're slightly to the side, then that's when you can pick up a few extra meters laterally.
Right. Okay.
You're not obstructing at all. So I think that's the key. It really is about this intersection. If you're going to meet before the defender is onside, that's going to be obstruction. But if you're going to do it that way, or if you're further away that way, then you're fine.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Cool.
Gareth, can I ask a final variation on that?
Sure.
Currently in the rules with deviation, often if a defender's deviated and kind of closed the gap that an attacker was going into, which instead has made the attacker kind of throw the long ball out to the wing instead, I've often then pulled it back for the penalty after that. Would we still be doing that?
And you should continue to do that. That's still obstruction.
Thank you.
Okay. So there's a couple of videos here just showing that obstruction, but as it's so jerky, I don't propose to show them. But please have a look at them. The first one's a really blatant obstruction. It's literally a body check. So that is the physical contact one. The second one's a lot more subtle. It's a change of direction, again, in front of the ball carrier, but both are offside penalties. Okay, before we move on then, are there any other questions about that? I mean, you can always ask them later if something comes to you. But as a side note to this, another thing this is something that we probably did, particularly around the try line, but now we're allowed. So there's no more saying, oh, you didn't call me offside, so you can't play advantage. Now, if you're offside, the referee is not required to warn you. So now as referees, we're in the situation that we always wanted to be in, where we can play advantage when we haven't had time, perhaps, to nominate a particular player. So hopefully this leads to a more flowing game. You're not forced to go back and give the penalty just because, for whatever reason, you didn't say offside number 6. So I think this is a positive thing. But as I say, certainly at elite level, we were doing this on the score line because the line's very clear. But now it applies anywhere in the field. So having said that, as referees, we should still do our best to nominate because it's good practice, it's good refereeing. But on the odd occasion where you don't get it out in time, you can still play advantage. So just something for players as well to note.
So you're calling, you're actually now communicating more with the attacking team, not the defending team, because you're calling play through or advantage, yeah?
You are,
As
yeah.
opposed to first having to name, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
13
but I'm not
off,
saying
play
I'm
through.
not saying that you don't have to name them anymore. So as a referee coach, I would always say keep warning offside players. I mean, that's our job as referees. But this is just a kind of fail-safe. If you haven't managed to, you should be. So, you know, if you haven't managed to do your duty, you have a get-out clause that you can still allow advantage if the player is still obviously offside. But please do continue to nominate offside players. I mean, that's what the referee's there to do. Okay. So the next one is the Mexican standoff. So again, no change in how it starts. If one defender sets foot inside the 7-meter zone, okay, it used to be the 5, now it's the 7. As soon as one defender sets foot in there, the standoff is initiated and all of the defenders must move forward. And really the only change now is that the phrase "at a reasonable pace" has been put into the rule. So there's no more marching on the spot. There's no more cat and mouse. You must move forward to make the touch, all 6 defenders. And again, that was something that we as referees did before. It's now just defined in the rules. So again, it's not really a change. So there's a video here. Again, Dave Baggio in Australia. I won't play it because it's a bit jerky, but please have a look at it. It just shows good what in Touch Football Australia guidelines they call positive intent to make a touch. So it's really clear that they're moving forward and they want to make a touch. There's no stopping, there's no pausing, there's no kind of wobbling. They are going out with the intention of making a touch. So the feedback from the Aussie refs is it's quite challenging to continually get the defense off the line, but overall they made it work, and it just makes the game quicker and a better spectacle for everyone. And nobody wants to see people marching on the spot and slowly coming out. So again, in England, we're going to take the approach. We talk to the players. We encourage them out. We set a standard of how fast we expect them to move, and any players that aren't meeting that standard, we warn them before we start blowing our whistle for penalties. But again, it's about consistency. It's about applying it at both ends of the field, equally to both teams, and consistently, or as consistently as we can from game to game. So again, there's 2 videos here, one with a really good pace of advance, and the second one where the players are, again, reluctant to come out and concede a penalty. But I'll let you watch those videos at your own time. There is one difference, though, and it really arises from the change from the 5-meter line to the 7-meter line. And that is because 7 meters is a lot further off the try line than 5. It is possible. I mean, no one tended to dump on the 3-meter line, for example. So it is now possible that the ball will come into the 7 before the touch. So maybe the ball's dumped on the 6 meters out or 6.5 meters out. So the ball is now going to actually come into the 7-meter zone, where it probably wouldn't have done in the past into the 5. And under the old rules, as soon as the ball came into the 5, you could drop to the line. And obviously that would not be a good thing. So if you were setting up for a strike dump and you mistimed it slightly, and you're dumping on 6.5 or 6, you don't want the players to just run away from you and you can't make the touch. So what the rule has specified is that can't drop to the line when the ball comes in, but they don't have to keep advancing. So obviously it's bad play to enter the 7 with the ball before you've got contact with the defense. You want to be contacting around the 7. But if you do happen to come in, under the new rules, the defense must just stand where they are. So they can drop, but they no longer have to come out to meet you. It's a small change, but it's an important one just to account for the fact that the 7 is a little bit further out than the 5. And again, I have a video here. So maybe I will show this one because it just shows. So 14 there, he's just come in. And to be honest, I don't know why. I have no idea why he's gone in. So under the old rules, all of these players could have dropped to the line as soon as he comes in. But now they can't, but they can just stay where they are. So they just hold their ground. As long as they don't move backwards, they won't be liable to penalty. But again, as good players, you wouldn't want to find yourself in this situation, really.
What about the situation where a defender calls no touch in the 7-meter zone?
Okay. And you mean but the ball's been dumped?
Yeah, they're kind of, well, really, they've got to back off in order to do that. So I would expect it to be a penalty.
Yeah. So if that happened now, if this guy did that when this guy was inside, obviously he would have had to, unless this guy completely messed up the roll ball.
Yeah.
He can't step backwards. So yeah, he would still be liable to penalty. Any other questions about the standoff? I mean, again, nothing much has changed. The line is just in a different place. The speed of advance, you can look at those videos and see what it is. It's like it's a decent walk to jog speed. And the only main difference is this one here, which I don't expect to see happen very often. But if it does, you just have to make sure as a referee that you keep the players from dropping, but they don't have to go forward. So normally if this happened, 14 would just come out again and reset the standoff. But for some reason, he doesn't in this clip.
Gareth, partly just a comment from me, but when I've been trying to play the new rules, this is the change that's actually been hardest to try and enforce because the players are just so used to dropping early. But I was just wondering advice on how harshly you'd ref this, because it feels a bit harsh to be kind of pinging the wing for kind of dropping once they've got inside the 7. So I'm just wondering what kind of level are we going to try and pitch this at?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, if this guy is running fast, I mean, to be honest, if he was running fast, I would say now that the touch is imminent already. So actually, if he was running fast and this guy was there, I wouldn't mind any of these players dropping to the line, as long as this guy doesn't. So again, yeah, so I'd be totally happy for Lincoln Winger to drop with this kind of separation if this guy was running in for the touch, because the touch would be imminent. Because this guy's kind of walking, I would probably be just telling him to hold. But yeah, I mean, this is just such bad play that it's probably a bad example. But literally, I watched 20 NTL games when I put together this presentation, and this is the only time it happened in those whole 20 games. So it's an outlier. I would say at kind of grassroots level and intermediate level in England, we might see it, but it will usually be with a player running in. And as long as the toucher keeps coming and makes the touch, all of these other players can drop, just like we used to play before with the 5. So I wouldn't be looking to blow too many penalties. My view will still be, as it always was, that this player is the player who must keep going out to make the touch. As soon as the attacker makes a step towards this player has to keep coming, but everyone else can drop. So as long as this player is disciplined, he makes the sacrifice for the other 5 players in not dropping early to allow them to go as soon as this player steps towards them. So it's more about making sure that this player stays up to make the touch. Again, I wouldn't worry too much about this ball in the 7 rule, because hopefully, as time goes by, attackers in England will get better at timing their strike dump, so they're not dumping between the 5 and the 3. Sorry, between the 7 and the 3.
Gareth, you say that as soon as he engages the right midfielder there, that he has to stay engaged and keep progressing. What about the left midfielder? What if he starts to drop quite early?
Yeah, so again, just to be absolutely clear, I'm ignoring the fact that they're inside the 7 here. So
Okay.
I'm talking more generally. Obviously, I'm talking about the case where this guy's running in. So just more generally in the standoff, if the touch is imminent, so as soon as the ball carrier takes their first step towards one defender, he can go, he can go, he can go, he can go. As soon as that ball carrier takes the first step, even if he's out on the, on the 15, as soon as he takes that first step and he's picked his man, then all these players can go. And that hasn't changed from FIT4. All that's changed is this rule that if the ball comes in, these guys can't drop. But again, I think it only really applies when they're walking. As I said, if this guy was sprinting at this point, the touch would be imminent. So maybe I'll play on the video to show what happens. Like, I don't even know what this guy's doing. So they don't have to keep advancing, but they can't drop. But it doesn't matter because I think this guy's had a brain freeze anyway. Okay.
Gareth, just one question on that. And if they do drop, is that a penalty, or would you just tell them to get back in position?
It's a penalty if you think it has affected the game. I would certainly say for the first time it happened, if you thought it was more accidental or it didn't really impact play anyway, just tell them and reset it.
Yeah.
And then second time, the penalty.
Okay.
Okay. Defense in the 7-meter zone again. So we mentioned this earlier, exclusion for 3 penalties. Again, this must be only in the standoff situation. So a defender has entered the 7-meter zone. The Mexican standoff is in place. And from that moment, the third penalty in that same possession results in the last player to infringe being given an exclusion. So it doesn't apply anywhere in the field. It's only after a defender has entered their defending 7-meter zone. I don't think I don't have a diagram of the field in this presentation, but I'm sure you can pick one out of the rule book. But there are essentially 4 sin bin areas now, 2 at each end of the field and 1 on each side of the field. So the first thing is that players who are placed in any of these sin bin areas, they go in the area on their sub-box side. And that's just to keep both teams separate. So you don't have 2 guys from opposite teams mixing at one end of the field when they're in the sin bin. If you're given a regular sin bin, you go to your attacking try line. If you're given this exclusion, in this specific case of the 3 penalties, you go behind your own defending dead ball line. So it's very simple for the referee. You pick the third player to infringe. You point to the corner of the field behind the dead ball line on the side of the sub box from the defending team, and the player who goes into that exclusion zone stays there until his team get the ball back, or her team. So it's three any type of penalty. Before we had the rule, it was 2 penalties for not advancing or dropping early. That rule no longer applies, so it's 3 of any type of penalty now. So it could be a hard touch, it could be a dropping early, and then it could be an offside. Any 3 penalties. So there's a video here. Again, I'm not going to show it. One thing, if you're a referee, you might look out for is this is, again, Dave Baggio and Kim Skelly. They actually do an interchange in the middle of this defensive set. And you'll notice Kim Skelly on the sideline holding up his finger to Badge saying 1, just so he knows how many penalties there have been. If you are coming off and you're the on-field referee, give the count not only of the touch, but of the penalty count to the sideline referee coming on, so that they know. I think that's a nice piece of advice from the NTLs. So I'm not going to show this video. Please look at it in your own time. I think this is pretty straightforward, though. Are there any questions about the exclusion?
Gareth, how does this kind of interfere or work with your kind of normal referee escalation? Because at the moment, if a team was repeatedly infringing constantly throughout a match, you might eventually warn them, next one sent for time or forced sub. Do we now see that 3 penalties in the 7 and then a sin bin kind of resets the clock and that's fair game? Or if they're constantly getting 3 penalties in the box, would we still escalate further?
Yeah, I think the default is that this is considered separate from the disciplinary ladder in the general game. But obviously, if too many of them, if they were doing it on every set, then you would start to be talking to the captain and handing out proper sin bins rather than this exclusion. But again, you judge it in the context of each particular game.
Okay, and then one further question. Currently, the refs have got a bit of leeway when they're sending people for time or forced subbing, whether they allow the attackers to do the raw ball quick or the penalty quickly or not. Is it still up to the referee's discretion in this situation, or is it a proper set? You stop play until they're in the sin bin out of the way? Or...
Well, actually, that is one of the rule changes that we'll come to later.
Okay.
But again, it's not really a change. So on a forced sub, it was always best practice for the referee to blow the penalty, give the mark, get the ball on the mark, get the attacking team all lined up, get the defense on the line, and then do the forced sub to give the attacking team the maximum advantage. And the rule change now merely just reinforces that in writing. So you have to do that now. So you don't immediately force sub the player. You get everything set up ready to go, and then force sub them. And that's now enshrined in the rules, which again is just bringing the rules up to date with how the game was refereed. Okay. So the other thing that has changed quite a bit, and from feedback in Australia, maybe not for the best, is the drop-off. And the motivation for these changes in the drop-off was to make it quicker. But I'm not sure it's made it fairer. So let me just talk you through the changes. So instead of starting 5x5, you start 4v4, and you play just a 2-minute period of the drop-off. Importantly, instead of the team that won the toss also starting the drop-off, it's the team that did not receive possession at the start of the match that starts the drop-off. And an associated change in the rules is that if you win the toss at the start of the game, you can choose to receive rather than to attack. And this is probably what most teams will do because of the implications for the drop-off in a result-required game. So if you want to start off the drop-off, and under the new rules, it's particularly advantageous now, you would choose to receive, I mean, by which I mean defend at the start of the game. If there's a winner at the end of the 2-minute period, then the game's over. But if the scores are still tied, you drop to 3v3, and then you play till next score. And already we have seen in Australia that it's possible to win a drop-off without the other team actually having possession of the ball. So it's definitely quicker, but it's potentially less fair. And it seems to give even more advantage to the team that taps off from the drop-off. But let's see how it goes. This may be one of the things that at the end of the 2-year trial period we tweak, but that will obviously be up to FIT. There's no right of reply either, so it's just next score after the 2-minute period if it's still a draw. Any questions on the drop-off?
Gareth, just a question from me. Can you just clarify the proportion of men to women in that scenario, if it's a mixed game?
Yeah, so the maximum number of male, I think it's on the next slide actually. Yeah, maximum number of males is 2. And if you have a male player in the sin bin, they count towards that 2. So that's the composition for mixed. Okay. Again, all this video is a drop off, and I'll leave you to watch that in your own time. So the next topic is half in place. If the half is not within 1 meter of the roll ball, then the onside defenders can move forward as soon as the player performing the roll ball releases the ball. So this is something that we actually talked about quite a lot last year in Europe, in terms of it was one of the interpretations that we brought in, and there was a lot of discussion about when is the half in place. Now it's explicitly defined, it's 1 meter. But again, just like the 7 meters, it's the referee's 1 meter. So whatever referee you have on field at the time will decide what 1 meter is. Again, if you're a defender and you're pretty sure the half is not in place and you don't have time to ask the referee, you feel you're perfectly entitled to go. But if you go without asking the referee, you leave yourself liable to a penalty if the referee disagrees with you. So if you have time, it's always best to ask the ref, can I go? And they'll normally let you if they agree that the half isn't there. But again, like in everything, feel free to gamble if you don't have time and be punished later. So, you know, if the half is 3 meters away, you're probably safe gambling. If the half is between 1 and 2 meters away, you might want to ask the referee. But again, that's the fun of the game.
Gareth, what happens if the half is there but is just a bit slow?
So again, this would be up to the referee. If the referee feels that the half is deliberately delaying play to gain an advantage, the first time probably would be a verbal warning. Second time, it might be a penalty for delaying play.
Okay, so so what if the half isn't being intentionally slow and the half is there? I take it the defence have to wait for half's hands and not just release of the ball. Yeah.
So again, the hands rule hasn't changed. So the default anywhere on the field is wait for hands. The player releasing the ball only comes into play if the half is more than a meter away when the ball is rolled.
Great, thank you.
Gareth, on that, you said if we think that the half's being slow, it's warning or then penalty. Or what I've been doing, and I think a number of other refs have been doing, is basically just calling the ball live. Is that not the right way of doing things?
I mean, that is a particular technique, and it can work at some levels of the game. I don't have a particular problem with that as long as it's not leading to an unsafe situation. So if you're calling the ball live when it looks like there's going to be a massive collision of the half and the defender. So again, just with that caveat, I would say, yeah, that's absolutely fair enough.
Okay.
Presumably as well, Gareth, the same considerations apply for the player performing the roll ball on not delaying the game, not delaying the roll ball there.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think that's most of the major ones. The rest I'll go through. I I don't imagine there'll be that many questions on these, but yeah, please interrupt me if you have any. So again, interchange on intercept or line break. There's no gate in the FIT5 rules. So it is possible to run in to one end of the sub box and sub on at the other, except in this one situation, which is now explicitly defined. When there's a line break or an intercept and a player is running usually the length of the field to score, you can't gain that extra 20 meters by subbing in one end of the sub box and out the other. So if that happens, it's an automatic sin bin, whether or not a try is scored. If a try isn't scored because of this player preventing it, then it's a penalty try. So again, this is pretty straightforward. Moving on then to the sin bin. So again, it's a new name. It used to be called period of time. It's now a sin bin. The length of that used to be at the discretion of the referee, depending on the seriousness of the offence. Now it's just been explicitly defined as 4 completed possessions. And that could be, that doesn't have to be 2 and 2, particularly if it happens around halftime. It might be 3 possessions for one team and 1 for the other. But yeah, it just makes it clear now. So that player is off for 4 completed possessions. There is one thing we have learned from Australia, that if you have a short possession, maybe 1 or 2 touches, that's interrupted by the halftime hooter, you can discount that one as one of the 4 at your discretion as a referee. So that's the only exception where the referee has a bit of discretion, and just use your common sense. And another change, before the player in the sin bin could just run onto the field at the end of their sin bin, now they have to go back to the sub box before coming onto the field. While they're returning from the sin bin to their sub box, one of their teammates can go on, but they can't go on to rejoin the field of play until they.
Sorry, Gareth, on that point, so if it's the 3 penalties within your 7 and it's still, you have to make it back into the box before.
No. So it doesn't apply to an exclusion. So at the end of an exclusion, you're straight back onto the field. It's just been that you have to go back to the box.
And previously, someone had to make the box before someone else could come onto the park, but now that's not the case. Just the sin bin time is finished, then someone from the box can come on. You don't have to wait for that player to get back into the box.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. So I mentioned the toss when we were talking about the drop-off. So there's one slight change to the toss. You can choose to defend from the tap-off. And the only reason you would probably do that is in a result-required game where you were thinking that you would get the tap in the drop-off. This is one that I like a lot, and it's long overdue. If you make an interception and you're touched, that's 0 touch rather than first touch. And the same thing for touched in flight. If the ball's intentionally touched in flight by the defending team and regathered by the attacking team, the next touch is also 0 touch. It's just common sense. So another good example of just the rules being updated in a common sense way. So there are a couple of videos. This first video just shows an intercept followed by a 7-touch set. And the second video shows a ball touched in flight and then caught. And maybe I'll just show this one because I think it's just a good example of referee signaling. So apologies for the jerkiness of the video, but you're going to see the ball thrown out right, touched by the winger there, and then touch made. So originally the ball's touched in flight. So under the old rules, that would have been 6 again. And that would have been the first touch, denying the score. But if you can see, both referees now, after that touch, signaling 6 again. So that touch was 0, and there's still 6 to come. Okay, there are a few changes around the tap. I mean, this was always a bit of a thing for some referees, but now for every tap, the mark must be indicated by the ref. So there are no more quick taps. You've got to ask the referee. You can't guess where the mark is, take it, and then if the referee's happy, they let you go. It must be indicated before the tap can be taken. And again, another really common sense rule that I like is that if you mess up the tap in any way, you take it from the wrong place, or you take a tap instead of a roll ball, that kind of thing, it's no longer a turnover, which used to just annoy everyone. You just get asked to go back and do it again. For restarts after a score or at the start of the first and second halves, or you can't tap off until all of the attackers are onside and at least 4 defenders are onside. So in all of those cases, if the player taking the tap gets it wrong, you're just told to go back to the mark and do it properly.
So Gareth, previously you could take a roll ball on a tap, but you couldn't take a tap on a roll ball. That was a change of possession. So now if you take a tap when it's just a roll ball, it's just do it again, but do a roll ball.
Go back. Yeah, exactly. Go back and do it again. Yeah. It's just common sense, because those things always just got everyone annoyed.
But definitely coach killers.
Yeah, for sure. So again, I guess what you have to look for here is delaying. So delaying the taking of a tap is now a penalty to the defending team. It used to just be a turnover and a change of possession and a roll ball. And a small change, we didn't really see this very often, but you used to be able to take the tap up to 10 meters behind the mark. Now you can't. You have to take it on the mark. So again, I invite you to look at this video. This just shows a guy taking a quick tap and being sent back by the referee. So roll ball. Again, one I like. It's made it explicitly permissible to just pass 1 foot over the ball. This was always a grey area. Now it's clear you can. And similarly, we're not going to be too pedantic on hip square. As long as the player makes a genuine attempt to square up in the roll ball, it's okay. And as long as they don't gain any significant advantage by not being square. So again, as before, it will be judged more harshly close to the try line. But as long as they make a genuine attempt, we just play on, because we don't want to be interrupting the game for pedantic hips not square. And then another minor one here. The half used to be able to roll the ball towards themselves on the ground like a rugby union scrum half. Now that's no longer allowed. You've got to pick up the ball cleanly from the roll ball. But again, it's not something we saw very often, particularly at elite level. Another one I like as a referee, although maybe this old rule wasn't enforced very much because it was completely counterintuitive. If you knocked the ball on and a defender tried to catch it and they dropped it to the ground, you would get the ball back under the old rules. That's no longer the case. So the first offence, the knock on, is now penalised with a turnover. So now if you knock the ball on into a defender, they have a free chance to catch it, in which case they would go into the next touch being 0 touch. But even if they drop it, they get the roll ball. So that just makes sense. It never made sense to reward someone for knocking the ball on. I even managed to find one example of it here, but watch that. Right, change of possession. The ball must be returned to the mark without delay. That's all it says. So it used to say pass or hand the ball to the nearest player was an option. Now it's just, as the team turning over the ball, it's your responsibility to get it back as quick as possible. So the criteria we judge it by are, you should return it as fast as you would as if it was to one of your own teammates. So no looping the ball up in the air, no running on and dropping the ball on the ground. You can't pass it to the winger if he's 50 meters away from the mark. Basically, we will judge by intent as referees. So as long as we feel, yep, they threw it to the nearest player to the mark, or they put it on the mark, they didn't delay it in any way, it's fine. But any indication that there's deliberate delay or time wasting should be penalised. So again, not really all that different to FIT4. And again, another change that isn't really a change. So it's always been the case under FIT4 that you have to catch the ball before grounding it. You can't just pat the ball down simultaneously with it landing. Now it's explicitly stated in the rules that you have to have control of the ball before and during the grounding score. As an example of it here, watch this if you haven't already. It's a really nice touch and a really nice catch and grounding. Sin bin area, I think, yeah, we talked about this already. So there's 2 at each end of the field. As a referee, make sure that the players go to either the exclusion zone or the sin bin area on the same side of the field as their own sub box, just to keep the players separate. Someone, oh yeah, it was actually Bud said that this happened in the Touch World Cup in Wandsworth last weekend, the fancy dress competition. I can't remember what he said happened, but yeah, you have to now, if you're touched behind your own try line, you have to wait for the referee to indicate the mark on the 7-meter line. You can't just run there and roll the ball. And I think one team did that last Saturday, and it caused no end of confusion. So again, simple example of that in this video. We used to have this problem of players retreating several meters beyond their own defending try line to give themselves an advantage in the advancing in the standoff. Now it's explicitly stated in the rules that they can't retreat an unreasonable distance beyond the try line. Again, this is at the discretion of the on-field referee, and we've said as a kind of arbitrary number, 1 meter, but it all comes down to common sense and intent. But I certainly don't see any reason why a player should be allowed to retreat more than 1 meter beyond the try line. Their momentum might take them just over the try line, but they certainly can't go 3 or 4 meters deep into their in-goal area anymore. That's now explicitly in the rules.
What is the punishment for that?
It's a penalty.
It's a penalty, okay.
Okay, the mark for interfering with the roll ball or interfering with the half is now 10 meters ahead of the point of the infringement. So these are the only 2 offences where this is the case. Most of the other penalties are either on the line where the team should have been to be onside or on the point of the infringement. But for these 2, because it's particularly at elite level, trying to discourage defenders from deliberately breaking down play, the mark is now 10 meters ahead of the point of infringement. And there's an example here in this video of the attacking team actually being told to bring it. They didn't know that.
Gareth?
Yeah.
At a lower level, would you enforce that rule at the kind of into touch leagues where it's accidental rather than malicious? Would you just ignore it or still try and stick to it?
To be honest, I think I would try and stick to it because the 10 meters at social level is actually a lot more than it is at elite level. So, and also, I think it sends the right message to the players as well, even if it takes them a while to understand it. So I would enforce it at social level, particularly as, you know, it's much harder for them to get up the pitch. So having an extra 10 meters makes a massive difference.
Gareth, I'm not sure I know what you mean by intentionally impacting the roll ball or the half. Could you talk through an example?
I mean, just a deliberate hard touch, or you know, the type of thing that you might see on fifth touch in a drive, a defender coming in and just killing the ball carrier.
Okay, so a hard touch would qualify as that.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so this, I mean, I think that the remaining ones are fairly trivial. You can't throw it forward yourself over an opposition player and regather it. Well, I'm not sure you would ever have got away with that in the past, but now it's actually in the rules. This one I'm not too sure about, because I hate phantom touches, and I think I'm not sure this is a severe enough punishment to make sure that we stamp these out as much as we can. But now a phantom touch is just punishable by a sin bin. At least what it does is give consistency, because referees can react to this in different ways. Some people may say, you know, that's a long period of time under the old rules, or a remainder of the game. Now it's just a standard sin bin for completed possessions. And again, it should be emphasized that by phantom touch, we mean a deliberate cheating by saying I made the touch even though I know I didn't. Not a touch, no touch, which is just a penalty.
Sorry, Gareth, can I ask you a question about that intentionally slowing down a roll ball? I totally get the hard touch, whether it's touch 1 or touch 5. What about sometimes when you get a touch on the side of a player and it's sometimes the ref deems that you pushed them sideways rather than, or if you push them down or sideways, that kind of stuff.
I mean, any of those situations where you feel that it was cynically and deliberately done qualifies. I mean, sometimes a sideways touch, even though the force required is way lower, is just as effective in putting the attacking player off balance. So, yeah, I think those all qualify.
And Gareth, would also a kind of deliberate knocking the ball out of the hands qualify under that rule as well? Yeah,
it would. Yeah.
So pretty much any roll ball infringement by a defender previously qualifies.
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think of any exceptions. So mostly, yeah.
Cool.
Okay, I think we're nearly there now. So the 4 try line markers are now defined as part of the field of play, so they're not out of bounds. So it's possible for you to slide in as an attacker to the corner and ground the ball, and as long as you don't actually make contact with the paint on the sideline or the grass beyond the sideline, your shoulder or your arm can brush the try line marker before the grounding, and you're not deemed out of play. So we mentioned this one earlier on, the sequence of actions for the forced interchange. This is what we always did before, or at least this is what we coached referees to do. And now it's actually written out clearly in the rules. So it's to give the attacking team the maximum advantage possible after a forced sub. So you, as I said before, you line everything up, get the ball on the mark, get the defense back on the line, have the attackers ready to go, tell them to wait. Then you force sub the defender, and that just gives the attacking team at least one attack on the line, 6v5. So I mean, this is not much of a change really. It's more of a wording change. So, and again, this comes back to what we teach in the level 1 referee course. The incorrect substitution was one of the 10 types of penalty that we used to quiz people on. Now it no longer exists. So there's a more general penalty for having 7 on the field, and the mark for the offence when you spot it is either 7 meters infield on the halfway line, or where the ball is when the referee notices and blows the infringement. Whichever of those 2 is the greater advantage to the non-offending team. So again, I have a video here. I won't show it, but yeah, one of the sub players messes up and one team ends up with 7. Referees notice, and that's the penalty on the halfway line. So this is something, again, that most elite referees would have done already anyway. If, for example, you're the half and you scoop and make a break, if you happen to brush against an offside defender, it doesn't count as a touch. So in order for it to be turned over, you would actually have to physically touch them. And sometimes you see the half push the player out of the way. That will count as a touch. But if you say you burst between 2 offside defenders and you brush shoulders with them, that doesn't count as a touch. But again, that's just putting in the rules something that referees were already coached to do under the old rules. So looking for 6 again. I mean, this is something that gets talked about quite a lot. If you just throw the ball into someone to get 6 again, it used to be just a turnover. Now it's actually a penalty, just to make the point that it's unsportsmanlike play. This is, again, not really a change from FIT4, but it's written down in the rules. It's considered obstruction now for the player in possession to hold or impede a defender. It's mainly aimed at the player performing the roll ball. And actually, I think I will show this video. I think this is a nice spot. So he's coming in here. So can you see his left arm? It's not much of a hold. It doesn't really impact play because it's in the drive, but it's just good refereeing to let the players know that you're going to spot something like this. Again, this is Dave Baggio, one of the top referees in the world. He spots it straight away.
So is that not penalty before? That's hooking, isn't it?
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. It's not a change at all. It was always a penalty, and it still is. It's just now written in the rule book as an obstruction penalty. But yeah,
okay.
That would always have been a penalty if it had been spotted.
I like that, if it's spotted.
Yeah. Well, they're hard ones to get. I mean, as a referee, you've got to have 6 different eyes looking in 6 different directions. So yeah, do our best. So this is the last slide. Just a few other minor changes. I mean, and these are really minor. So the mark for an off the mark penalty is now where the infringement occurred, not where the roll ball should have been performed. Injured players are no longer counted when assessing whether a team has the required 4 players. The concepts of simultaneous touch and dead heat catch no longer exist, aka referees have to make a decision one way or the other. If the ball no longer meets the required specifications, play has to be stopped and either the ball fixed or a new ball brought on. Referees are no longer allowed to wear metal studs. I mean, not that we really ever did, but it's now explicitly stated in the rules that it applies to referees as well as players. And then any coaches beyond the dead ball line are not allowed to communicate in any way with either team or with the referees. So I think that is everything. How did we do on time? Not too bad, an hour and a half. That was good. Any last questions before we stop?
Sorry, Gareth, can you just go back to that? What were you saying about the mark for an off the mark penalty? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's very minor and it's almost meaningless. But okay. Say for example, you ran on 5 meters and rolled it. Rather than having to take the penalty there, the team getting the ball can have a 5 meter advantage on that point by going back to where if you see what I mean. Yeah. So it's really meaningless because you could almost argue that's a different offence. That's running on with the ball. So yeah, it's a very pedantic change, but it's not going to impact the game in any way.
Thanks.
Gareth, could I have a question on the intentional deflection point we just at the end?
Yep.
So if it's intentional pass into a player penalty, what about at the kind of lower levels when you have it happen kind of accidentally? Like you often see the lower level players kind of just panic and throw it into a defender's back or something. I'd normally just do a turnover at the moment. Would we still have the penalty as well?
So again, it's up to the referee to judge intent. And again, I think you also have to look at the defender's intent too. If it's a legitimate pass and there is an attacking player in the line of the pass, and the defender has stepped in there at elite level, they know what they're doing, and that's going to be 6 again. At social level, I think it's usually clear from the look on the player's face. If they haven't a clue that they've, committed an offence, then it's just a turnover. So yeah, this particular decision is all about intent.
Okay, superb. I've got one more question on the obstruction rule.
Yeah.
What I was hoping to do was to talk through an example with kind of 3 variations. I've got many different answers from different refs that I was hoping you might be able to kind of clarify.
Probably not.
Apologies if it's kind of treading old ground. But the scenario that I've been trying to go over it in my head. So 2 mid defenders are both up and flat. Attackers kind of take a quickie on that.
Yeah.
Attacker initially attacks short side, but they're defending mid, corners hard, shuts off that option. So the attacker steps back to go between the mid gap. The other mid hasn't kind of defended well. There's a massive mid gap. The other mid realizes that and then deviates off their line to cover that gap. 3 variations. So the first one of that variations, the other mid deviates to close the hole and interferes, kind of obstructs play before making it back onside. I'm guessing physical contact, obstructed play, clear penalty in that situation. Variation 2, the other defending mid deviates to close the gap and makes it back onside just as that score would have been made, but prevents it being scored. He's affected play, but he's not physically obstructed until he's made it back onside. And that one,
to me, that's a good touch.
Okay.
He's deviated, but there's been no obstruction.
Okay, so it is really that you need to have a kind of physical contact to justify as obstruction. Or
no, it doesn't have to be a physical contact, but to me that sounds like, that's the case of a quicker shot being allowed, but being facilitated by a deviation, but not actually ever getting in not intercepting the attacker's line before getting back onside. That defender got back onside and then made the touch. Although again, I'm finding it hard to picture that situation, because if the attacker sees them coming, they should be able to slide to the line and get the ball grounded and make it impossible for that player to make the touch before the ball's grounded. But without seeing it, if it was the case, for example, if the attacker was dawdling, that would be a legitimate touch because there was no obstruction.
Okay. And then the final variation, which might be impossible to say without seeing it, that other defender shuts. You as the ref aren't sure whether on that line they'd interfere with play before or after getting onside, but the attacker sees it, thinks the option's gone, and throws a long ball out to the side instead. Again, he's changed play, he's interfered with play after deviating, but he's not necessarily obstructed if the attacker chooses a different option in advance.
Yeah. So I think that's a penalty, but where I would disagree with you is in the second case, the defender hasn't interfered with play. They've just made the touch. They haven't interfered with what the attacker has done. But in the first and third cases, they have. So I would say the first and third are penalties. The second is not.
Okay. it's going to be interesting when we get out and ref in the real world. But that's
I'm sure there'll be plenty of debate. I'm already looking forward to it. Okay.
Yeah, Gareth, can I just ask one more thing about the zero touch on an intercept? Now, often in play, the player will be touched very, very quickly after the intercept is made. But if that player intercepts, runs 10 meters, let's say, and then gets touched, is that still zero touch?
Say that again. I didn't quite follow that.
On so the zero touch is when an intercept is made, and then the touch is made. That would normally be first touch, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Now that's zero.
Yeah, now zero touch. But if the player who's caught the ball runs, let's say, 10 meters up the field and then is touched.
Oh yeah, it doesn't matter how far they run. They could run 6 and be touched, and it would still be zero touch.
Okay.
So as a referee, what we're going to be coaching is that at that zero touch, the referee gives the 6 again signal at it or just after it to let everyone on the field know that there are 6 more coming.
Okay, right.
So you would hold off doing that as a referee when the ball is intercepted. Because it's that signal still means 6 again. It doesn't mean 7.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So apologies to anyone who had their hand up while I was presenting, because I couldn't see the hands. I can see them now. So I can see that Jeffrey and Jason have their hands up. But yeah, apologies if I was just relying on you to interrupt me, which, well, most of you were. So does anyone have any further questions?
Yeah, I seem to be the only one that's got my hand up now. Sorry, Gareth. I know you've had various questions on this obstruction rule. It's just to clarify it.
Yeah.
In essence, what I'm seeing there is tracking.
Yeah.
So,
but tracking in front of the ball carrier.
Yeah, as long as you don't.
It's fine.
Sorry.
Tracking to the side of the ball carrier is fine, and away from the ball carrier. It's tracking directly in front of them and critically close to them. So basically, the further away you are, the more latitude you have to change direction without impeding the attacking team, whether that's laterally far away or vertically far away.
So would it be fair to say that as long as you maintained about a meter and a half distance, you wouldn't be classed as obstructing?
I don't think you can ever make a sweeping statement like that. I can think of plenty of examples where 3 meters away might still be classed as obstruction. So I'll be careful about saying that.
That's why I'm asking. I'm not a referee. I'm just a coach.
So again, I think the way I like to think about it is intersecting paths.
Yep.
It's where that point of intersection is. If that point of intersection is before you hit the onside line, it's probably going to be a penalty.
Right.
If it's on the onside line or after it, then you're probably okay. So I think you just have to look at the attacker's line and make sure that your line is going to intersect their line after the onside line or on it. Anything more than that, then you're going to give away a penalty. And sometimes maybe it's better to give away a penalty, but then as a referee, we start to bring in personal penalties as well. So I'm sure all these things will come out in the wash when we start playing in earnest.
Yeah, no doubt. No, that's no worries. It's just to clear it up. So in essence, we've got no issues with the change in direction as long as we're not, deliberately tracking or impeding the line of attack.
Yeah, and just like every sport and every player versus referee interaction, the players will try to push the rules as far as they can, and the referees will try to be as consistent as they can, and we'll find a balance. And if we do that and we have regular dialogue, we'll find that right balance point. But yeah, it will evolve.
Magic. Cheers, Gareth.
Okay, I don't see any other hands. Any last questions before we call it a night? Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I really hope that I get to see you all very soon out on a field. Let's get through this lockdown period as best we can. And hopefully 2021 will be a lot better than 2020.
Thank you, Gareth.
Cheers, Gareth.
All right.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. Really appreciate that. Thanks for all your
Thank you.
help.
That's
Have a good
really
weekend,
helpful.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Stay safe, everybody.
Bye.
All right.